It's trash day, I'm putting you out, it's trash day. Putting you out, it's trash day. Putting you out of my mind. It's trash day, I'm putting you out, it's trash day. I'm putting you out, trash day, I'm putting you out of my mind. Now I'm gonna clean up, now I'm gonna clean up, now I'm gonna clean up the house. I'm taking all your garbage, taking all your garbage, taking all your garbage.
It starts with some beer, so you shouldn't have fear. Two garbage guys with facts, but they both still have tact. It's that time at last for the best damn podcast. It's Can Crusher Day!
And welcome to my favorite part of the week. It is time for Can Crusher Spotlight. But before we get to going on the interview, I need to welcome the English professor. John, how are you?
I'm doing great, Mark. And you had to have me for this one. Considering who the guest is, this is someone I've always wanted to talk to and get to pick his brain. So thanks for having me today, man.
Yeah, this is a Can Crusher OG. Folks, it's Duke the Dumpster Droese coming on the show. And John, this is our childhood all over.
It really is. We loved the guy when he was in the WWF. And when we were in high school, Mark, if someone told you you're going to grow up and be a garbage man and get to be buddies with Duke the Dumpster, what more would you want out of life than that?
I'm in a 30-year time loop. It's unbelievable.
There's a lot of things I want to know, too. He wasn't there in the WWF for a long, long time.
Was he really a garbage man?
Yeah, who knows? Who knows? So we got to find these things out.
Yeah, so, all right, I think we should go to it, right?
Well, before we do that, let's hear from Al Snow for his collar and elbow plug.
Yeah, great shirts, guys.
Wrestling. A love and a passion we all share. I've started a wrestling brand. The wrestling brand. A brand founded on the aspects of wrestling. Two entities working together to create a product that connect emotionally for people everywhere. Collar and Elbow is the brand. Passion and love for wrestling is the drive. I am Al Snow, and this is Collar and Elbow, the wrestling brand.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Can Crushers. This is one of the interviews we have been waiting for a very long time. Former WWF superstar and Can Crushers OG. Welcome to the show, Duke the Dumpster Droese.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on the show. And finally, Duke the Dumpster Droese has made it to the Can Crushers podcast.
Right?
It's about time.
We're so excited to have you on the show, Duke. I am Mark. That's John joining you today. And what a career you have had. But we always like starting at the beginning, Duke. What made you love wrestling?
Well, as a kid growing up in South Florida, I used to religiously watch championship wrestling from Florida with Gordon Soley. And I grew up watching that. And later on, when I was in high school, I joined the wrestling team, amateur wrestling. And but I just remember the hype for WrestleMania 1, this big company, the World Wrestling Federation. It was like this new thing to me at that time, and they had this new extravaganza, WrestleMania 1, and everybody was talking about it, and all the hype behind Hulk Hogan and Mr. T and Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff. And I went and watched that on closed circuit television with my dad at an arena because there was no pay-per-view then. And I just remember that being the moment I knew I wanted to become a professional wrestler. And it was at that point in my high school career that I ended up finding a school and started learning how to become a professional wrestler.
And where did you go for your training?
Well, when I was a high school wrestler, and at one point we actually did a fundraiser in our gym, like many people do, and we used the wrestlers from Championship Wrestling from Florida. So we had guys there like Lex Luger and Barry Windham and Kendall Windham and maybe even Dusty Rhodes, I think, at that time. And my dad was there too, but the wrestlers, the amateur wrestlers, we got to work security, walk the guys to the ring. But my dad asked around and found a school, and there was a guy wrestling there at the time named Tyree Pride, the Haitian sensation, Tyree Pride at Championship Wrestling from Florida. And he had a partner that was running a school in South Florida, a guy by the name of Bobby Wales. It was just a ring set up in a little dirty warehouse. And there was a handful of guys that were training there. And I just remember me and Norman Smiley were two of his students. And there was probably 3 or 4 other guys at that time that I don't think ever really pursued wrestling any further. But Bobby, the Jamaican jammer, Bobby Wales, taught me how to wrestle in a little dirty ring in a little dirty warehouse. And Norman Smiley was there too.
Wow, that's unbelievable. John, go ahead.
Hey, Duke, this is John. You have a few things in common with the Can Crushers, namely working for the sanitation department. But, Mark, I don't know if you heard, in a sense, Duke and I were both at the first WrestleMania. I don't know if I ever told you, Mark, that I was there.
Duke, this is a running joke. He has never been to a WrestleMania, but he tells everybody that he was at WrestleMania 1. So I'm glad you guys met there.
I saw him there, actually.
I was at WrestleMania 1. I mean, maybe I lead people to believe I was front row. I was not. I was in a room next door. I was in the overflow room watching it on closed circuit TV, much like you, but I could hear the chaos from the actual garden next door.
Nice.
Yeah. Question for you. You mentioned your father kind of helping you try to find a school or a mentor. So your family was okay with this, Duke?
Yeah. My family was always okay with basically anything I wanted to do. They always supported me. And it's funny because the reason that I bring up the fact that my dad actually asked around about schools was because I was the heavyweight wrestler on the team, this big, tough-looking dude, but I was too scared to talk to the wrestlers. I was a chicken shit. I was a high school kid, and I was a chicken shit. And my dad took it upon himself because he knew I really wanted to do that. And he started walking up to the guys and just talking to them. You know, he was one of those annoying people, but they pointed him in the right direction, and I was able to find a school and get started.
Yeah, you sound like me. Unless I'm behind this mic, I'm a chicken shit as well, Duke. I still, at 42, get the jitters talking to wrestlers. Like, I'm pumped up right now. This coffee is actually calming me down talking to you, so.
Awesome.
We were at just to that point, Duke, we were at a wrestling event last night, and Dominic DiNucci was there. And Mark's like, here, he hands me a card. He goes, you speak a little bit of Italian, work your magic. He'd have been too afraid to go up to Dom and say, hey, we have a show, we'd love to have you on. So Mark has a bit of a phobia reaching out to people. But anyway, we're not here to discuss his anxiety.
I'm glad to smash on Mark Day. Duke, so were you really ever a garbage man like myself?
I was never a garbage man. I was not. I just I kind of brainstorm. I remember I was brainstorming ideas. I was wrestling. I was going to college at the University of Miami, and I was wrestling on the side part-time in these little, what you call now independent shows in Florida. And there really wasn't much going on, but I knew I had to have some kind of a gimmick. And at that time, I noticed in the World Wrestling Federation, they had a lot of gimmicks that were real life, common man, different types of jobs, if you will. And I just at the time I had the name in Florida. I had the name Rocco Gibraltar, and I was trying to think of a catchy gimmick that I could put with it. And I remember thinking up the name the G-Man Rocco Gibraltar. And I was trying to figure out what the G-Man was going to be. And it was either going to be like a G-Man, like government FBI agent, or G-Man Garbage Man. And then I realized the Garbage Man Rocco Gibraltar was a catchy name.
That's pretty
So
badass.
that is where the gimmick was born. And I started wrestling in Florida as the Garbage Man Rocco Gibraltar with the same exact gimmick that Duke wore. Everything was the same except the name, and I had a name tag that said Rocco. As a matter of fact, not a lot of people know this, but when I first got signed to the World Wrestling Federation and they flew me up for my vignettes, Shane McMahon produced my vignettes. So me and Shane drove around Stamford, Connecticut in his Corvette to find the guys doing their trash route with the garbage truck, so we could do vignettes off the back of it. And we ended up also going to the dump, and he grabbed a shirt off hanging on the wall and covered up the top part of my gimmick because I still had the old Rocco name tag on it. And he had just told me like the day before that they were going to make my name Duke the Dumpster. So that is a little known fact is why I wore that tan overshirt the very first probably 6 months I was in the World Wrestling Federation.
I want to bring it to the dump. I know you were there for a vignette, but isn't it the worst smelling place in the world? Like, were you actually out walking around in the dump?
I was climbing up in the heap of garbage. Shane goes, climb up there, climb all the way. You can see there's a vignette of me climbing. I was like halfway up their big heap of trash. Lord knows what kind of shitty diapers and everything else were in there. And I climbed up there just to cut promos. As a matter of fact, I cut a promo laying in the back of the inside of a garbage truck at a TV taping. But yeah, those places smell horrible. When I did a promo tape that I ended up handing Vince McMahon as the Garbage Man, Rocco Gibraltar. And I took a local promoter who was also an announcer to the local landfill in Homestead, Florida, which was nicknamed Mount Trashmore, Florida, by the way. And
nice.
That was hometown for a long time. In the WWF, that was my hometown, Mount Trashmore, Florida. But we did a promo there in front of this heap of garbage. And it was, you see, at least in Stamford, Connecticut, when we did it, it was in the winter. So it took some of the smell off of it. But when we cut that promo, a year before probably, in the heat of South Florida, on the top of that landfill, that was the worst smelling thing I've ever. And matter of fact, on a bad day when the wind was blowing in the right direction and you're driving by on the Florida Turnpike, you could smell Mount Trashmore, Florida.
Yeah,
wow.
It's unbelievable. John, someday I'd like to throw you in the truck and bring you, because you're also, it's not clean walking either. You're actually walking on garbage when you're dumping the truck, and it gets slick, and there's times that you can fall and you wallow around in it. So you kind of look like Duke did in the WWF. It's hideous.
That would be an awesome experience. So the WWF kind of employs some method acting then, Duke. I mean, these aren't necessarily unreal circumstances or phony circumstances. They're bringing you to a dump, to a garbage site, and really making you get a feel for it.
Well, that's certainly what Shane McMahon did. At that time, he was probably about 23 years old. He was just kind of working his way through the company. One by one, he would go to each department. His dad was having him really learn, I think, each department. And when I got there, he was in the studio learning that stuff. That's why he produced my vignettes. And yeah, it was all his masterful plan to take me to the real dump and cut the promos and do the stuff in the back of the garbage truck. You want to talk about disgusting. They had me laying in the back of that garbage truck like I was asleep. Laying inside that thing was the most disgusting thing I've ever done. Wow.
And this is why you got the Slammy Award in 1994, tied with Hogg, but for the most smelliest. And do you still have that Slammy Award, Duke?
I never actually got a Slammy Award for that.
Oh.
I remember hearing that, but yeah, I didn't get that. I was at the first Slammy Awards, and the first one I can remember. And I think they had me do a vignette for that where I was impersonating a bunch of the other wrestlers. But yeah, I mean, I heard about that, but I don't think I ever got a Slammy. I might have left right before or somewhere around that same time, but no, I didn't get to carry around a Slammy Award like Owen Hart did.
That's too bad.
Yeah, you deserve it. You do.
Hey, rewind just a little bit. You hear guys saying all the time, they're calling Pat Patterson, they're calling Vince's office, they can't get through. What's your big break? How do you contact these guys? How do they contact you back?
Well, as I was saying before, I created a promotional package with a promo tape and everything and a highlight reel on it, and I did an actual resume. And I probably copied about 30 or 40 of these tapes and created 30 or 40 of these promo packages. And my plan was to drive around the country and hand them out to promoters and try to get hired. Well, right before I went off on this adventure, I read an article in the local paper, the Miami Herald, that was talking about the steroid scandal, and they had been interviewing Hulk Hogan, who was at a local convention at that time in the Miami Beach Convention Center called the NatP Convention. It was a convention for TV executives, and they were interviewing Hogan about the steroid scandal, and he had just jumped to WCW. I remember at the end of the article, there was a sentence that just said, Vince McMahon, who was also in attendance at the convention, had no comment. And it was at that moment I realized Vince McMahon was in Miami, Florida, at the Miami Beach Convention Center, and it was a week-long thing. They were there all week. And if I could get in there, I could personally hand him my promo pack. So I had a friend that worked for a local TV station who got me credentials, his own credentials, which wasn't my name on it, and I put a suit on and put the credentials around my neck and just walked right through the door like I was a TV executive. And first thing in the morning, while he was still drinking his coffee, I walked right up to Vince McMahon, shook his hand, told him who I was, told him I wanted to wrestle for him, and pitched him for about 45 seconds. He asked me a couple of questions, and then I turned and walked the hell out of there before I had a chance to even think about it. And I did not go by the WCW stand on my way out. Because I figured he was watching me.
Right? That's unbelievable. And that's just how different wrestling is today than, how you have to get your name out there. That you were just balls to the wall right in there. Here you go, Vince. I'm Duke. See you later. You'd get shot now from a security or something.
Oh, yeah. They keep him well guarded now. I mean, there was, I think, 2 people in history that have walked up to Vince to get their jobs. It was me. And right before me, it was Oscar from Men on a Mission. He walked up to Vince and was riding an elevator with him and just started freestyle rapping, and Vince hired him as well. But after that, I think they started kind of taking precautions so people couldn't just walk right up to Vince. And then, of course, later on, like now, they just pretty much develop their own talent. They sign people to developmental deals. It's so different now. I mean, I knew in my case, I didn't have a relative or a good friend that worked in the World Wrestling Federation. So it was going to be difficult for me to even get somebody to look at me. So, because I've been in that office and I've seen the pile of tapes sitting off in the corner of the room in the office, the tapes that all these wrestlers send for them to review. And in large part back then, because it was still VHS tapes, just getting ready to move into the DVD era, but I don't even think they looked at all of them. There was just so many. And so for me, I felt I saw the opportunity to walk up to Vince and hand it to him personally. And I jumped on it because, I knew I wasn't going to get another shot like that. So I had to take advantage of it. And that's what I tell people even today is like, you never know when opportunity is going to arise. And when it does, you need to grab it. You need to go for it. And you need to be prepared. So it all worked out good.
That's great. Yeah, that's gutsy, and it was obviously the right thing to do.
So, Duke, one of the things when you first came into the WWF, your first match against Jerry Lawler on Monday Night Raw, you're actually, Tommy Dreamer's innovator of violence and everything, but you brought the hardcore to Raw. You took your own trash can off your head. How did that kind of spearhead your career for, those couple years in the WWF? Because you were hardcore before they had a hardcore.
Yeah, when I was working down in Florida, it was a regular part of my routine to smash somebody over the head with a garbage can. We always worked it into the matches, and the people loved it. But when I came up to the World Wrestling Federation, the thing with Jerry the King Lawler, that was my first feud. That was my first issue. And I remember when I was walking out for my first match on Superstars, he was standing there to interview me, and he put a clothespin on his nose, making a joke about the fact that I smelled really bad or whatever. And I dumped garbage over his head, and that started it. So then he called me out on the King's Court at the next live Monday Night Raw. So the idea was, the way the office wanted us, the producer wanted us to do it was, he was going to bring me out there. He would not let me get in the ring. He would not really let me talk very much. And I finally get sick of it, tell him I didn't want to talk to him anyway, and I walked away. And that pissed him off, and he was just supposed to come attack me. And that was going to set up the heat of the feud so we could wrestle further. Me and Jerry were talking about it in the back beforehand, and he said to me, what would you think if during the attack I grabbed your own garbage can and hit you over the head with it? Now, I knew that would get a lot of heat, and I said, yeah, I think it's a great idea. And so me and Lawler went to the producer of our segment, which was Blackjack Lanza, and we asked him if he thought it would be okay or if we needed to ask somebody to get that okayed. And I just remember Jack looking at us and saying, it's live TV, guys, just do it. So we did it. It turned out the way it did. He attacked me, smashed me over the head. Now, if you watch it, and it's on YouTube, if you watch that segment of King's Court when he attacks me, the minute he hits me over the head on live TV with that can, the camera angle cuts away to a far, far angle in the arena, so you can't even see him hitting me anymore because they freaked out. When we got back to the back afterwards, everybody was freaked out and like going, what the hell happened? What were you doing? And they were not happy with it because at that time they felt, the office, that was too violent for World Wrestling Federation television. And if you watch, Gorilla Monsoon and Macho Man Randy Savage, who were doing the commentary for Raw at that time, came back on the air right afterwards and apologized for how violent that was and promised you would never see that again on World Wrestling Federation television. And then they took it one step further and they had Jerry the King Lawler on Superstars the following week. Did a pre-taped segment where he was made to apologize to me for attacking me with my can, and it totally just killed all the heat of the angle I felt. So you talk about it propelling my career, it almost killed my career in an instant because we went ahead and did something that they considered too violent for World Wrestling Federation television.
Was there heat following that from TV people, or was that just preemptive on Vince's part? And who was feeling it? Lanza, you, Lawler?
I just remember when I came back, and again, up until this point, Shane McMahon was really hands-on with my gimmick. And I remember when I came back from the Monday Night Raw segment in the locker room, Shane McMahon was the first guy to run up to me, and he goes, what the hell happened? And I go, we just talked about it, and we asked if it was okay, and Jack said it was okay, so we did it. And he goes, oh, okay. He just walked away. And I don't know. I don't think Jack got any heat, but it was just, they weren't happy about it. The Office, they at that time were pushing. It was the original PG era.
Yeah.
You didn't see blood at that time. They were catering. They really wanted to be family entertainment, especially for kids. And it was frowned upon. They were not happy with it. The Office was not happy. But I remember during that TV loop, I was riding in a rental car with Adam Bomb and Bob Holly, and they were freaked. They were like, man, that's some serious shit you just got involved in. And, they were like, couldn't believe it, because they saw the potential for how hot that angle could be. And they were just like surprised that I got thrown right into it. But yeah, it actually threw a big bucket of ice water on it is what it did. And we ended the feud on another Monday Night Raw, where I beat Jerry Lawler by count out only because Doink and Dink the Clown came out and, got involved, and it set up their angle with Jerry Lawler. And we never even got a pay-per-view match out of it.
Duke, you're talking about John and I's heyday of wrestling, from, staying up late Monday nights to not going to school late until Tuesday, because we were watching all these guys, you and Doink and Dink, Adam Bomb, Bob Holly, as you mentioned. Are there any stories of those car rides? You could maybe leak one that is, PG or maybe PG-13 from one of those rides? Well,
as far as like the Adam Bomb and Bob Holly car rides, I remember when I first got there. I have an interesting sense of humor. If you've ever been on my social media, you could tell. And I won't take shit off of anybody. And I just remember we were riding. It was me, Adam Bomb, and Bob Holly. And for some reason, me and Bob Holly got into an argument about something. And he started trying to insult me. He said, well, at least I'm not embarrassed to take my shirt off in public, is what he said to me. So I turned and looked at him and I said, well, Bob, I can always go on a diet, but what are you going to do? Join Hair Club for Men? And that's exactly what Adam Bomb did. He popped, and Bob Holly turned to me, and I just remember, I think he had some food in the car and he had a fork, and he just gripped this death grip on the fork, and he looked at me and he goes, I'll stab you right in the fucking neck. And the veins were popping out of his forehead, and Adam Bomb was laughing his ass off. But that was a story, yeah, from when I was riding with those guys. But yeah, there's lots of stories, of course.
He always struck me as a bit of an aggressive guy, Bob Holly. Is that pretty accurate?
I mean, Bob was always an easygoing guy. Bob's, he's a nice guy. I will tell you this about Bob Holly. There was this certain time where, see, when I first came into the WWF, I was not in the greatest shape. I was probably about 315, 320, had a lot of fat. And at one point I decided, okay, I'm going to make these guys push me. I'm going to get in great shape. So I started training with Bob Holly. Man, that dude, talk about a work ethic. We would train 2.5 hours a day at the gym, on the road. And I never trained. I mean, I learned a lot about lifting weights and bodybuilding and training from him. But I will say, as far as him being, I don't know, like angry, a lot of guys in the World Wrestling Federation at that time were not happy with the push they were getting or not getting. Adam Bomb was one, Bob Holly was one, and at a certain point I was one. I wasn't happy with it either, because if you're not one of the top guys, then you're one of the bottom guys, pretty much. Opening to mid-card status at that time would not make you a lot of money in the World Wrestling Federation. So these guys were bitter about that. And again, I was one of them, but there was times where Bob was pissed off about things professionally, but at that time he was not a bully or anything like that. He was always cool. He was cool with me. You know, I don't think his position in the company he wasn't one of the veterans, so to speak, at that time or top guys. So I think that came later, and maybe that's when things changed for him. But Bob's always been a cool dude. I've seen him at conventions. He's still cool to me. So, you know, I never had a problem with him.
You said you weren't, and these were kind of your words because I don't want you to punch me through the computer, a little bit out of shape, a little bit overweight going into your WWF career. But that's perfect because that's what garbage men are. We sling garbage and drink beer in the afternoon. So you were perfect can crusher physique then. We love you for that.
Yeah, but the problem was it's not really conducive to having really exciting wrestling matches. You know, I was just a brawler style of wrestling in the ring, and although I could move, I moved really well for a big guy, but I had to take some weight off so I could do more in the ring, and I just wanted to look better. You know, it's the better shape you're in, the more you can sell yourself and possibly improve your position, get in a better match, main event maybe someday, and, you know, merchandising and all these great things. Because, you know, Vince McMahon has always liked the big, muscular guys.
Always.
And so that's what you always tried to reach for when you were there. And that's what I did. And I wanted to look better. I wanted to be in better shape and have better matches. So that's why I decided to get into better shape. And if you look at the difference of when I wrestled Jerry the King Lawler and when I later on wrestled Triple H at an In Your House pay-per-view, you can see the difference in the shape I was in.
Nice segue, because I know John's got a question about Triple H for you. It's like you're reading our notes.
Of course. I figured.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about Triple H and China. You know, you sort of had the snobby aristocrat from Greenwich, Connecticut against the garbage man. Perfect wrestling theater. But China and others have said you could always see Triple H's ambition even back in the day. People would overhear him say things like, I'm going to run all this one day. I'm going to own all this. He wasn't arrogant about it. He was just ambitious. Did you get any of that working with him? Did you get a sense like this guy's really going to be somebody? Or did he ever express to you, I want to be on the other side of this business someday?
He never expressed that back then. You got to understand, this was when I was there working with him. It was way before China. It was way before Stephanie or any of that stuff. It was back when he was first breaking in to the company, when he had first come from WCW. I remember the first day when he was there. He was just kind of standing in the back up against the wall at a TV taping, and some guys were walking up, shaking his hand. I didn't know him. I walked up, shook his hand, introduced myself. He was a real nice guy. But the thing about Triple H is he was always very driven and motivated to do well in the business in general. He had a wrestling mind. And the Clique guys in general always took wrestling very seriously, and of course, except for the curtain call. But they would always sit around and talk wrestling. You know, that was something that was lost on a lot of people. But Triple H was the same. He was very driven to do well and improve himself in the business. And he was and is a great wrestler, worker, whatever you want to say. And he was one of the very few guys that did not drink or do drugs, and he still doesn't. That's how serious he was. A lot of us, you know, we wrestled and did that part of it, and we got in great shape during the day and got a nice tan and wrestled and tried to put on a really good show. But then by night, we were like rock and roll stars. We'd go out and drink and party all night long. And he kept his eye on the prize. He did not do any of that stuff. And so it was very apparent early on that he was serious about the wrestling business. But no, China wasn't there then. He would walk to the ring with different models. And I remember at the end of my feud with him, I think there was an issue with him and Sable, and that's how Mark Marrow was introduced. And then he had a feud with Mark Marrow. So, but that's kind of my take on Triple H. He was very driven and very motivated in the wrestling business.
You talk about the parties, which brings me right back to the Nature Boy, Ric Flair, and we've heard his lifestyle of, wrestle a match, go out and spend $5,000 on, drinks, and then do it again the next day. How much is that true with you guys? I know you said you were rock stars, but in the 90s, I thought maybe that calmed down, that with the wrestling opening up a little bit more compared to the 80s, I thought you guys maybe just stayed in your hotel rooms, but you were still out partying and everything?
Yeah, no, we did not. Most guys went out to the bar, and to some extent partied and drank or whatever. I look back now at some of my old promo pictures, and I can tell you at least half of them, I had a horrible hangover when I did this. I just look at the bags under my eyes, and the daggum official promo photograph from the World Wrestling Federation, Duke the Dumpster Droese, is hungover with bags under his eyes, because we would party like that, man. We get 2 hours of sleep, get up and drive to the next town, and do what you got to do. But that was kind of the way it was, and I didn't party with Ric Flair personally, but I've heard the same stories. But yeah, that's how it was, man. By night, you just go out, and especially me, I wasn't married or didn't have a girlfriend at the time, so I was having fun. And a lot of the guys that were married had fun. They didn't care. But, yeah, it was very much, I always tell people when they ask me what it was like, I say we were professional level athletes and rock and roll stars at the same time.
Real quick.
So when we...
Judd, hold on real quick. Your drink of choice, since we always do a beer of the week as well. What's your drink of choice, Duke?
Well, now I don't drink at all, but back in those days, I will tell you, and I was not too long ago, I was on the Steve Austin podcast, and he laughed his ass off at me because he knew this was true. I used to drink Jack Daniels and Diet Coke because I was trying to stay healthy.
Was that right after you got the Big Mac and a Whopper too?
No, I didn't even. We used to live on chicken breast and egg whites and all that stuff. But when I first got there, yeah, I was eating all kinds of garbage, and I realized that was not the way to go because I felt it in the ring. And if I was going to drink and party, I had to, at least during the daytime, I had to try to stay healthy and eat healthy and work out hard. But yeah, there was a lot of drinking going on. I thought Diet Coke made it more healthy to drink all that Jack Daniels. And a lot of guys in those days were drinking Jack Daniels. So
when Mark and I go back to YouTube or the WWE Network and we watch a Duke the Dumpster Droese promo and we say, man, his eyes are bloodshot, or you can see the bags under his eyes, he's probably drunk. We're not wrong, Duke. Is that what you're saying? We might be right?
You are more than likely absolutely correct.
Unbelievable.
Hey, about that lifestyle, about pay, without going into any specific numbers, I'm curious because we've heard different things. We heard guys say, it was a great weekend if you worked with so-and-so, or if you could work with this guy, you made a ton of money. And I've also heard people say you waited until WrestleMania, and I never quite understood what that meant. You waited to see how WrestleMania did, to see how everybody else was going to do. So what is the story? Was it decent pay week to week, and WrestleMania was a huge payoff, or how did pay work?
All right. Pay in those days was terrible if you were not one of the top handful of guys. Shawn Michaels, Undertaker, at that time, Diesel, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Razor Ramon. All the guys in the clique were making money. Those guys were all generally the top spots on all the pay-per-views, and they made all the money. But for the rest of us peons, we didn't make much money. It was really bad. Vince was struggling. The business was struggling. Vince was losing a lot of guys to WCW. WCW was turning up the heat and competing with us and taking a lot of our viewers and our fans because at a point their product was better because Vince was still holding on to that family entertainment bullshit. But the payoffs I've often talked about, when you wrestle on a house show and you're on the road on a house show, you have the option to take a $200 cash draw from the agent that night if you feel you need it for road expenses. Well, it got to one point there in like 95 into 96 where I realized there were some shows, if I didn't take my draw, I wouldn't make $200.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and I didn't get to wrestle on my only singles match pay-per-view was the In Your House match against Triple H. And that was a decent payday. It was more than I ever made, but, it wasn't anywhere near as much as like the Undertaker and those guys were making in those days. But my main pay-per-view was the Royal Rumble. I always knew I'd be in the Royal Rumble because everybody's in it. But the saying about WrestleMania, the numbers for WrestleMania will generally tell you how good of a year it's going to be. That's in the early part of the year. And if WrestleMania comes off good and the payoffs are good, generally it's going to be a more favorable year, hopefully. But I was there I came in right after WrestleMania 10. I was there for 11 and 12. And I left just before 13, and those were not very good WrestleManias as far as 13 is when things started to turn around when Austin and Brett had that match. But,
Right.
11 and 12 are certainly horrible, I think.
I can't disagree with you. I cannot disagree with you. Duke, you also had merchandise as well. Again, without going into numbers, did you guys get part of a kickback from the merchandise from the WWE? It was just from the magazine because there wasn't shop.com or anything. Did you get a portion of that, or was that all to Vince?
No, you signed in your contract. It's a very small percentage that you would get, but I didn't have any merchandise. I didn't have anything like these guys. The only stuff I was on was trading cards, which was not a money-making piece of merchandise. Other guys had all the T-shirts and stuff in the magazines. You didn't see any Duke the Dumpster stuff. And it's funny, I always joke, from time to they've stopped coming now, but up until I want to say a year ago, every so often I'd still get a quarterly royalty check from WWE, maybe for like $75 or something, because my elbow or my fingernail appeared in a video from Bret the Hitman Hart or Shawn Michaels, maybe. So I get 0.000001% of a penny for each video sold. But no,
that adds up.
And I'll tell you, the royalties were really bad in those years too. It was just lean years all the way around during the new generation era. So, I remember one day in the locker room, Kevin Nash was talking about royalties during that time, and they had just hired a new guy for merchandise. And he goes, ever since this guy took over merchandising, my quarterly royalty checks are $5,000 less each quarter. And I just remember thinking to myself, what the fuck? I make $500. 5,000 less. Jesus. Couldn't imagine how much he was making. So there was definitely a disparity, a separation between the haves and the have-nots during those years.
Hey, Mark, Duke just did a really good Diesel impression, didn't he?
He really did. Better than yours. Better than yours.
Mine, yeah.
Yeah, well, you heard him complain enough in the locker room, and he's making thousands of fucking dollars, and he's complaining. But
You mentioned house shows a little bit What was that like? Because there were points when Mark and I were going to house shows in our area, and WWF Television is advertising them, and they're running down the card, and we think, oh wow, they're advertising our little show in Little Town, Pennsylvania, and then it turns out they're talking about another little town in Pennsylvania. So that same card is traveling from town to town, sometimes more than once a day. Is that right? Did you experience that too?
We didn't do a whole lot of double shots back then. I remember only doing like one or two in the couple of years I was there, but house shows was a big part of the revenue in those days. Now it's more TV and licensing and all the merchandise and stuff, but in those days it was more old school house shows. And so yeah, they had to push those house shows in the local market on TV and get people to hopefully come out. But again, I remember during that time, I would be able to look out through the curtains and see how few people were there to judge whether or not I should take my draw so I could make any money or not. But, and in those days too, they were cutting off like 2/3 of arenas for TV to make it look full. They had to cut off a certain percentage of the arena or it would look empty on TV.
They're doing that sometimes now. The whole Seattle area, what was the last pay-per-view right before Extreme Rules or whatever, where Daniel Bryan was with Rowan? Like, they shifted everybody over on SmackDown. At one point, they showed the other side, and I'm like, damn, that's the first time they've done that in forever. And, like, the Seattle markets was really rough this year. Did you ever see any markets that were more worse or, badder than another?
Anything that wasn't the Northeast United States was rough in those days. The United States in general was tough. The only really good houses for house shows were over in Europe. Europe and Germany, and specifically Germany, was really good during the New Generation era. That's why everybody wanted to be on the overseas trips, because that's where you could make some money. But yeah, man, everywhere in the United States was rough in those days.
Oh, a couple more things. When you were on the way out of WWF, did you ever have the opportunity to go to WCW? You saw that it was getting hotter. Did you say, damn, I need to make that jump?
Yeah, what I did is when I ended up leaving WWF, it was this big back and forth. It was during the Triple H thing. I wasn't happy, and I had just had a new contract renewal. See, Vince made all these promises, and then I signed a new contract, and then they went back on everything. But I got angry, and I started having these discussions with Vince McMahon that I wasn't happy, and then I actually said to Vince one day at TV, if you're not going to use me any better than this, just send me home. Well, then, basically, a couple months later, Jerry Briscoe walked up to me at a TV and said, Vince said you can go ahead on home. I still had like 8 months left on my contract. So I sat out 8 months. I went home and just started lifting weights and getting in shape. And I wanted to go to WCW. Now, I didn't necessarily I knew some guys working there, obviously. I used to work with them in WWF at the time, but I kind of pulled the kind of same deal that I did with Vince McMahon at that convention. I walked into a Nitro into the back like I was supposed to be there and started shaking hands. And J.J. Dillon, who had jumped from WWF back to WCW at that time, came up to me and gave me his card, and eventually they set me up with a tryout match. And I actually had a dark match for WCW where I worked with a guy, and it really didn't go that great. After I did not wrestle as the Garbage Man, I was wearing a singlet, but I was pretty big in those days. Like I said, I was lifting weights to get ready, but I just remember afterwards Arn Anderson calling me Crowbar, and that's never a good sign because that means I was too stiff with the guy. The guy that I wrestled ended up screwing up some spots, and I just kind of took over and kind of beat on him. So it wasn't a good tryout, but I actually had a tryout for WCW, and it just didn't work out.
Wow. That's news that not many know.
No, as a matter of fact, somebody fished up I couldn't believe this, but somebody actually dug up the dark match, and it is somewhere on my social media now. I actually wrote a story with it, and yeah, it's interesting to watch it because I don't know, I was just crazy in those days, but yeah, it's out there somewhere.
John, you got some digging to do this afternoon. You need to dig through that social media page.
It's all out there. You just got to be willing to look for it.
Yeah, and if you look on my Facebook page, I tell a lot of stories and show a lot of videos of situations where there's things that people would not have necessarily known or seen. But when I bring it up, you can see it. And but yeah, that video is somewhere on the Mike Droese Facebook page. So.
Yeah, do you want to give everybody where they can follow you? I know you're on Instagram and everything else, too, so they can give you some more follows, Duke?
Yeah, absolutely. On Facebook, which is where I started telling stories on Facebook. My personal Facebook is Mike Droese, and I can't take any more friend requests. But I post everything public, so you can come see everything there. I also have a fan page, Duke the Dumpster Official on Facebook. I also have Instagram, which is also Duke the Dumpster Official. And I have a Twitter account, which is Real Duke Droese. So those are all my social media outlets.
Never thought about Snapchat yet, huh? You're not going to do some videos of feeding the dogs or anything?
No, I'm not really too keen on Snapchat. I'm on Snapchat. I think I'm on there as Mike Droese, but I never use it.
Yeah, I don't either. I completely understand. Go ahead, John.
Hey, as an avid Can Crushers follower that you are, you know that we have some fun tournaments on there, whether it was King of the Ring winners, we throw them in a tournament. Right now we're doing a multi-generational tournament. We've got like one of the Von Erichs against one of the Usos today. Well, Mark's out one day, and he sends me a text saying, Duke the Dumpster Droese voted on our matches. And there's a million jokes between us. I think he's being funny. I go to the page. I see a guy with the last name Droese. I think, oh, okay, you're being funny, Mark. He goes, no, that's really him. And I thought, no way. And I clicked on him, and there it is. So that's pretty awesome that you like our page.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome to have gotten to talk to you.
Yeah, and it's entertaining to go through some of the stuff you guys are posting. If I like something, I'm going to click on it. So, yeah, I do enjoy the page, and I enjoy that sort of thing with those kind of survey-type questions or whatever with different wrestlers versus other wrestlers, stuff like that. It's all cool, and I like that stuff. So, yeah, I try to be involved in it. And if I like a page, I follow it and like it.
Duke, we're 42-year-old children. Let's not lie.
I'm 43.
All right.
I got a few months on you.
Whatever. So we're almost 45-year-old children, and my wife's looking at me right now, giving me the thumbs up that I'm, a 10-year-old trapped in this body. So that's what this is all about.
Yeah, we're never going to grow up. I'll be 51 on Tuesday. I'm a 51-year-old, 10-year-old kid, basically. So yeah. I'm still a mark for the business, and I'm still a goof.
And you're still working, Duke, right? I just saw somewhere you were in Philly earlier this summer, in the spring.
Yeah, I think that was Icons. I did in Philly, I did a Chikara event in Philly too.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm still taking bookings, and I do limited wrestling matches. Let me see, September 28th, I'm supposed to be in Keokuk, Iowa, southeast Iowa, and October the 19th, I will be down in South Georgia at the Thomas County Middle School for an anti-bullying event, October the 19th, down there in South Georgia. Those are my next two bookings.
As you see, we have some connections with some Pittsburgh wrestling, some Altoona wrestling, names that you might remember on your way through the WWF. Are those ever a possibility if we can pass a number along that you could, IWC always does a Night of Superstars, or Imagine, that is now owned by, his name was Cato, and then Manny Fernandez is actually part of it as well. Would you ever be willing to come up and visit us?
Oh, yeah, I'm always willing to work with different people and different promoters in different situations. So, yeah, absolutely.
As well, I would get punched in the face if I didn't say this one. You're real close to OVW, closer than I am, legitimately. And Al Snow's a great guy. Would make your way to OVW to help train those kids, or give them a word as well, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I would be. And Al's a great guy. A matter of fact, I stole some free collar and elbow gear from him when we were at WrestleCon up in New York. But yeah, Al Snow's a cool dude. He's always been a cool dude to me. And yeah, I'd love to go up there and do some stuff with OVW.
For real, Duke, are they great shirts or are they great shirts?
They're awesome shirts.
We are always on this. You have a Fruit of the Loom shirt, which is, these shirts are just so comfortable. We have to get our spot in, Duke, by the way. They're just so comfortable that, if they're going to be good for Duke the Dumpster, they got to be good for you guys.
Yeah, they are awesome shirts, man. And I hope the next time I see them, I can steal some more from them.
Yeah, maybe I'll have to work on that, because I'm still trying, being sponsored by them, and Al's actually in Florida right now, hanging out. See, you have to work for OVW a little bit.
That's right.
So, Duke, you also have, we'll let you go here, a couple more questions. You also have a YouTube channel, or you were doing it. Are you still doing some stuff on there?
Well, I had started doing a podcast with a group of guys down in Georgia, but we kind of went our separate ways. It was called Talking Trash with Duke the Dumpster Droese. And I may continue the podcast at a later date, because I'm moving from Middle Tennessee over to near Memphis, actually, is where I'm going to be living. But I no longer work with those guys. It was a great idea, but it just didn't work out for me, and the car drive and the stuff. It just didn't work out. But I am going to start it on my own once again very soon. And I have my own YouTube channel that I'm getting ready to start. And it's also Duke the Dumpster Official on YouTube. But there's not anything there right now. I'm not posting anything just yet, but I'm going to start again. And I will start the podcast again. I don't know if it'll be called Talking Trash, but it'll be something to that effect.
The OG Can Crusher? Maybe. Just tying that in there. I don't know.
Maybe you can have us on there.
Can Crusher. Yes. I like it.
John, do you have anything else? Because I just lost my thought.
No. That you were very forthcoming with all of your answers. You're very generous with all of your answers. We really appreciate it, man. We were fans of yours back in the day, and this is truly an honor to get to talk to you.
No problem at all, and I really appreciate you guys having me on the show, and it has definitely been fun, and I hope we can do it again sometime.
Duke the Dumpster Droese leaving it open that he might come back to Can Crushers. Mark, what a cool dude this guy was, wasn't he?
And he wasn't a garbage man, but he was wallowing in the back of a garbage truck. John, I've actually wallowed in the back of a garbage truck before. It's disgusting. This guy, I feel for him. I need to go take a shower for him after that interview.
Yeah, that was some serious method acting he was doing to get into the part of Duke the Dumpster. But he was definitely committed, and it was fun watching him back in the day, and it was great listening to his stories today.
Yeah, I'm shocked at that when we talked about the Jerry Lawler and the first hardcore spot that I kind of brought up. I didn't know it buried him as much, and I didn't know he had so much heat on him backstage.
That's really a shame to think where that could have gone, what he what he spearheaded. You're talking about a G-rated era, and he and Jerry Lawler and maybe, Blackjack Lanza helped to launch something new, and the WWF not long after that would take full advantage of that. One of the ironic things from this interview is he's talking about Bob Holly how do most of us remember Bob Holly? Hardcore Holly. You know, would there have been a hardcore without Duke the Dumpster?
I want to reference it to something that's now, though, John. Without that spot and then going to hardcore, is there a 24/7 championship? Because that's where they got the rules from it now.
You know what? I just want to remember Duke the Dumpster and the hardcore era and all that in a positive light. So I don't want to think about any influence they may have had on the 24/7 title.
I know you hate that, but I'm just saying that it's a cross reference. That's all.
Sure. Yeah,
I know you hate
okay.
it. I know you hate it, but it's just the way it is.
Yeah. Well, we'll agree that Duke the Dumpster's work helped to launch, and I don't want to overstate this, but helped to launch a style of wrestling, maybe helped to launch some careers.
I agree. I agree. What was the number one thing that you got out of this interview, though? And then we'll wrap it up.
The main thing I got is that these guys, while they were maybe living a rock style life to an extent, a rock star's lifestyle to an extent, the money wasn't there like we maybe thought it was. You know, these guys aren't all millionaires. It was a rough road there for a lot of guys.
My take is Duke the Dumpster Droese has a set of balls on him just to walk into WWE headquarters and say, "Hi, my name's Duke the Dumpster Droese, and I'm going to be a wrestler." Not on that level, but you know where I'm going because I'm always the 10-year-old child. John, would you want a job, you know, with anybody? You're just going to walk in and say, "Hey, this is who I am."
That takes guts, man. It really does. Would I do that? I don't know. I really don't know, depending on the circumstances. You know, maybe desperate times call for desperate measures, but that's not to take anything away from Duke the Dumpster Droese. That's still a gutsy move, but you know what? He wanted it. He wanted it, and like you said, the opportunity was there. It wasn't going to be there forever. It was there in that moment, and he went and took it. And we're all better for it. You know, we got an opportunity to see him on TV.
Yeah, for sure. I can't wait to reach out to Duke again in, you know, maybe a couple months or so. I want to know what he thinks about wrestling now. I mean, he's going to be on his YouTube channel, but we got to bring him back on Can Crushers and find out what he thinks about what the WWE is doing, where AEW is going, just pick his brain a little bit about that. That would be another great interview with him.
Yeah, there's so much more. We only got to the very surface of what we wanted to ask him.
Yeah, for sure. So, all right, John, I got to go cut the grass.
Remember, Mark, just because you're trash, it doesn't mean you can't do great things. It's called a garbage can, not a garbage cannot.
Have a great weekend, guys.